I'm Alan Weiss, and this is The Writing on the Wall.
Welcome back to The Writing on the Wall. This episode's about polarization. Antipodal, some people say antipodal. Antipodal means opposite poles. I just came back from Australia 2 weeks ago, from Brisbane. It's really antipodal to where I am today. Polarization, being at opposite poles, is worse than ever. Not only must I be right, but you must be wrong. That's polarization. It's moral narcissism. I'm right because I occupy the higher moral ground. So there's confidence, folks. I have a lot of confidence. Confidence is the honest-to-God belief that you can help people. Then there's arrogance. Arrogance is the honest-to-God belief you have nothing left to learn yourself. And then there's smugness. And smugness is arrogance without the talent. And polarization is often a result of this moral smugness. Eric Hoffer was a longshoreman in New York. No formal education to speak of, became a moral philosopher. And he said that most causes start out legitimately, but then they become movements, and then they become rackets. That's what I think the woke movement is today, by the way. So we have this fanatical need for confirmation bias, and we find it on social media. We only listen and read people who agree with us. We ignore people who don't. And social media have become a huge cesspool of confirmation bias. The tilt of the news media has leaned toward this kind of polarization. In the Pennsylvania Senate race, when Dr. Oz was running against Fetterman, and Fetterman won, and they debated. Fetterman had had a stroke, but he won the election. The presumably objective moderator refused to call Dr. Oz doctor. He's a medical doctor. He only would call him Mr. Yet Jill Biden, who's Joe Biden's wife, the first lady as we call her, who has a PhD, as do I, we insist on calling doctor. But he wouldn't call Dr. Oz doctor. So we have this tilt of the news media. The World Cup is being run as I'm recording this, and we have fans from all over the world. And a fan is a cognitive fanatic. And we've become fanatics, not just fans. Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts, for example, are tribes. And they ran a famous psychological experiment where they paid 100 people who were Dunkin' Donuts loyalists to drink at Starbucks for a month, and vice versa, the Starbucks people to drink at Dunkin' Donuts, their coffee, and it was paid for. And at the end of the month, they would measure how many people defected to the other store. And the results were no one did. 0. Because the people from Starbucks went to Dunkin' and said, Formica tables and these sugared donuts, and you can't get soy milk from Brazil? And the Dunkin' people felt at Starbucks they were intruding in someone's living room. And the couches, and 1,700 choices. And what the hell is venti venti anyway? So these are tribes. Tribes believe in their own totems. And by definition, they're polarized. But underneath, we're more similar than dissimilar. I've been to Australia now 19 times. And I find Australians and New Yorkers are very much alike. Australians talk funny, but very much alike. Because you can argue and argue and argue. And at the end, they say, well, okay, mate, that's enough. Let's go have a beer. So it's never personal. You can argue, but it's not personal. Nobody's on a higher moral ground. Do you know that 80% of the United States House of Representatives seats are safe? 80% of the 435 seats are non-contested. They're safe, or there's little competition. Same person every year who chooses to run, or same party every year. Over 25 of the 100 senators have served for over 30 years. Why do we get polarization? Because people are installed and ossified and calcified in office, like woolly mammoth fossils. John Dewey had a quote. He said, saints engage in lofty introspection up on mountaintops, but burly sinners run the world. And so us sinners have to run the world. So feel free to think you're smarter and more righteous than I am, that you're on some higher moral ground. But think about, what if you're wrong?